With tears in her eyes, she whispered, I promise I'll be good. Don't leave me. I love you. She never thought she would find herself here, in this quiet corner of the world, sitting by herself, surrounded by memories that she couldn't shake off. Her life had been a long string of complicated moments, filled with both heartache and fleeting happiness. But something about this place, this moment felt different, like a new beginning was just within reach. It wasn't that she hadn't tried to build something good. She tried to love and be loved, tried to find peace within herself, and tried to heal from the wounds life had given her. But as with most things in life, it wasn't that easy. Love had often slipped through her fingers like sand, leaving her feeling empty and unsure if she could ever trust again. Her parents had done their best to protect her, but they too had their own issues, their own hearts to heal. Their struggles had left her feeling a little lost. It wasn't anyone's fault, of course, but the love she longed for seemed so far away at times. The world around her had always seemed so loud, and she felt like she was barely making sense of everything. There were times when she could almost hear her heart breaking, the weight of expectations too heavy to carry. She had a few friends, people she could talk to, but even with them, there was always a wall. It was hard for her to let anyone too close because, in the back of her mind, she was always afraid of the inevitable disappointment. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't enough. But then one day someone came into her life, someone who didn't seem to carry the same baggage. He was different, kind, and easy to talk to. There was something about him that made her feel at ease, something that made her believe just for a moment that love might actually be possible. At first she was cautious, keeping her distance. She had learned long ago to protect her heart, to keep it safe from harm. But he didn't give up, and slowly her walls began to crumble. They spent more time together, talking about everything and nothing. His presence felt like a balm for the deep cuts she had carried for so long. She couldn't help but laugh more around him, the weight on her shoulders easing with every conversation. But as much as she wanted to let herself fall into this new love, there was always that part of her that hesitated. She had been hurt before. She knew the pain of losing someone too well, and the thought of it happening again was almost too much to bear. Despite her fears, she let herself hope. It was a small, fragile thing, this hope, but hope was all she had. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. She knew that love wasn't perfect, that it wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could have something real. But life, as it often does, threw a curveball. The joy she had started to feel began to fade into uncertainty. Something happened, something she hadn't expected. It wasn't a huge moment, but it was enough to make her question everything. A small misunderstanding, a missed text, a moment where the trust between them felt shaky. Her heart began to race, the fear creeping back in. Was this going to be just another relationship that fell apart? Was this going to get hurt again? She couldn't bear the thought of it. Her hands trembled as she replayed the events in her head, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Warm. Was she overthinking things, or was there something deeper at play? The anxiety weighed heavily on her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt unsure of herself. She had been so confident, so hopeful, but now she felt like she was losing her grip on everything she had just begun to believe in. She sat by the window that evening, staring out at the stars, wondering if it was all too much to ask for. All she wanted was something real, something that didn't hurt. But it seemed that every time she let herself hope, something came along to remind her of the pain she had tried to forget. It was easier to keep her heart guarded, but then what was the point of living without truly feeling? The days passed and the doubts lingered in her mind. She started to pull away, afraid of letting herself feel too much. She told herself it was for the best, that it would hurt less if she just didn't care. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She cared more than she had ever let herself show. As she lay in bed that night, her thoughts kept racing. What if she pushed him away? What if this was the beginning of the end? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it hard to breathe. But even in the midst of her doubts, she couldn't help but wish for a future that was different, one where love didn't feel like a constant battle. The next few days felt like an emotional blur. She couldn't focus on anything. Her mind kept circling back to the same thoughts, the same fears. Was she making a mistake? Should she give him a chance, or should she protect herself from the potential heartbreak? She didn't know how to navigate this new territory. One evening, when they were together, the silence between them felt louder than anything they had said. She could sense that something was off, but she didn't know how to bring it up without sounding paranoid. She was afraid of seeming weak, of letting her fears show, but the distance between them was growing and it hurt more than she had anticipated. She was sitting across from him in the small cafe where they usually met, trying to force a smile. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers for an answer. He knew something was wrong. He had always been able to tell. What's going on? He asked gently. His voice was calm, but there was a sadness in his eyes. You've been quiet lately? She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out right. She wasn't sure what she wanted to say. How could she explain the storm of emotions inside her? How could she tell him that she was scared of losing him, scared of loving him too much? I don't know, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I guess I'm just afraid. He leaned forward, his gaze soft and understanding. Afraid of what? Afraid that this won't last. Afraid that I'll get hurt again, she confessed. The words came out in a rush, but they felt like a weight lifting from her chest. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding inside until now. I don't know if I am strong enough for this. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, reassuring. You don't have to be strong for both of us, he said quietly. We'll figure it out together. Her heart skipped a beat at his word. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of the fear and trust him completely, but it wasn't that simple. Her past had taught her that love could be unpredictable and painful. Trust was something she had to work at, something she wasn't sure she could give without risking everything. I just don't want to lose you, she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. I don't know what I would do if I did. He squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with emotion. I am not going anywhere. I am here, and I am not going to leave. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. She stared at him, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. Could she trust him? Could she really open herself up and let him in without fear of being hurt? I want to believe you, she whispered, her voice full of uncertainty. I really do. I am not perfect, he said, his voice firm but gentle. But I promise you, I am here, and I am not going to hurt you. The words were simple, but they were all she needed to hear. Slowly, the fear inside her began to fade, replaced by a glimmer of hope. She still had her doubts, but for the first time in a long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this. As they sat there, hands still intertwined, she realized that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never being afraid or always having the right answers. Love was about showing up, being present, and trusting that no matter what, you would be there for each other. It was a small step, but it was enough to make her believe that maybe this time things could be different. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, doubts, and small moments of hope. She tried to push away the nagging feeling in her chest, the one that told her it wasn't going to last, but it refused to go away. Every time they spoke, every time they laughed together, the fear crept back in like a shadow that refused to leave. Was this real? Or was it all just a fleeting moment in a world full of uncertainties? She had spent so much of her life protecting her heart, building walls so high that it felt impossible to trust anyone again. But in him, she saw something different. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't perfect, but there was an honesty in his eyes, a warmth in his touch that made her want to believe in what they had. Yet, as much as she wanted to hold on to that belief, there were still questions that lingered. Would he be there when things got tough? Would he stay when the world felt heavy and their love was tested by time and distance? Or would he, like the others before him, walk away when the going got tough? The doubt gnawed at her, especially in moments when they weren't together. The silence between them felt heavier, even though they'd spoken just hour before. It was as if the distance between their heart was growing with every passing second. She could hear her own thoughts too loud, too chaotic, and she hated the way they made her question something she had begun to treasure so much. But she couldn't keep the distance between them forever. She had to know the truth. So, one evening, after days of pulling away, she asked him to meet her. The cafe where they had first met seemed like the perfect place, a quiet corner where they could talk without the noise of the outside world interrupting. As he walked in, she saw the familiar smile on his face, the one that always made her heart skip a beat. But today it felt different. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of her own thoughts or the tension she could feel in her chest, but something was off. She knew it and she could see it in his eyes too. I've been thinking, she began, her voice quieter than usual. She couldn't make herself look at him fully, afraid that if she did, she might lose the courage to speak. I know we've been through a lot, but I don't know how to keep going like this. He sat down across from her, his expression soft but serious. Warm. What do you mean? She could feel her heart racing, her words tumbling out before she could stop them. I don't want to keep wondering if you'll leave me. I don't want to keep living in fear of something that hasn't even happened yet, but I'm scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of giving my heart to someone and having them walk away. He was silent for a moment, looking at her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. I'm not going anywhere, he said finally, his voice steady but full of emotion. I know we are both scared, but we can't let that fear control everything. Not now, not after everything we've been through. I'm not perfect, and I'm sure I'll mess up sometimes, but I'm here. I want to be here with you. Her heart fluttered, and for a brief moment, the doubt that had clung to her chest began to ease. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe this was worth fighting for. But the next few days would test everything. It wasn't just the fears inside her anymore, it was the weight of the world outside. Life had a way of testing people, of pushing them until they were at the edge, waiting to see if they would fall. And suddenly she was facing more than just her fears. She was facing the reality of how fragile everything was. The first test came when he had to leave town for work. It wasn't long, just a few days, but in her mind it felt like an eternity. She wasn't sure why it hit her so hard. They'd been apart before, but this time it felt different. Every message he sent, every call they shared, made her feel like they were growing farther apart, like the space between them was widening with every moment. When he returned, the distance, both emotional and physical, seemed to have grown during those few days apart. She tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself that it was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal, but deep down, she knew something was off. There was an unspoken tension between them, a barrier neither of them knew how to break. One evening, as they sat together, she finally spoke the words that had been haunting her. What happened? Why? Does it feel like we are so far apart? He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. I don't know. I feel it too. The conversation that followed wasn't easy. It was filled with moments of vulnerability, moments where both of them admitted things they hadn't said aloud before. The truth was simple yet painful. They were both afraid. Afraid of the unknown. Afraid of what might happen if they let themselves fall too deep. And in that moment, as they sat together, both of them unsure of what the future held, she realized that love wasn't just about the moments of happiness, it was about the willingness to face those fears together. It was about choosing each other every day, even when things weren't perfect. It wasn't long before things began to settle into a rhythm. They were still unsure of where their relationship was headed, but for the first time in a while, they were willing to take things one day at a time. There were still moments of doubt, of fear, but they were learning to navigate them together, not letting them define their relationship. They had their ups and downs like any couple, but it was clear that they were growing. It wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about learning how to be there for each other through the tough moments and the easy ones. Slowly, she began to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. Slowly, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be something real. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, she looked at him and smiled. I don't know if I am ready to say it yet, she said softly, but I think I am starting to believe in us. He smiled back, a little hesitant but full of hope. I don't need you to say anything yet, he replied. I just want you to know that I am here and I am not going anywhere. It was enough. It was more than enough. Because in that moment, she realized that love wasn't about perfect timing or the absence of fear. It was about trust. It was about choosing each other even when things were hard. It was about finding the courage to be vulnerable, to love without hesitation, and to believe that together they could face whatever came their way. As she rested her head on his shoulder, the weight of the past began to fade, replaced by the warmth of the present. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be more challenges, more fears, more doubts, but they would face them together, hand in hand, and that was enough to make her believe that love could be something real, something worth fighting for. Life had a way of testing everything, and as much as she had hoped that things would become easier over time, she knew deep down that love was never meant to be without its struggles. But what she had learned in the past few months was more valuable than any of the answers she had once sought. It was about learning how to grow, how to trust, and how to stand by each other no matter what. The challenges they had faced together had, in some strange way, brought them closer. The emotional distance that had once seemed impossible to overcome was now a thing of the past. They had both grown, not just as individuals but as a couple. The doubt that had clouded their minds at the beginning of their journey had faded, replaced by something deeper: understanding, patience, a commitment to see each other through whatever came next. But even as they started to feel more confident in their relationship, they knew there would always be more obstacles. The future wasn't guaranteed and life was unpredictable. But that was something they had learned to accept. It wasn't about trying to control what happened next, it was about facing it together. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, afraid of being hurt, that she almost forgot what it felt like to let someone in completely. But now, as she looked at him, something had shifted. The vulnerability that once terrified her had become something beautiful. In letting go of her fears, she had found the strength to embrace the love that had been growing between them all along. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun deep below the horizon, she realized how much she had changed. She wasn't the same person who had walked into this relationship months ago, unsure of herself and afraid of opening up. She had learned to trust, to love, and most importantly, to believe in herself. It wasn't just about him anymore, it was about her too. She had come to understand that love wasn't just about needing someone else, it was about needing herself as well, learning to be whole even when things weren't perfect. He looked at her then, his gaze soft, yet filled with something unspoken. He had seen the way she had grown, the way she had let go of the fears that once held her back, and for him, that was everything. He knew that love wasn't just about what you could give to the other person, it was about lifting each other up, supporting each other through the tough times, and helping each other become the best versions of themselves. I never thought I'd find someone like you, he said quietly, his voice full of sincerity. You taught me so much about what it means to love, to trust, and to truly be there for someone. I didn't know how much I needed this until you came into my life. Her heart swelled at his words, and for a moment it felt like everything had come full circle. All the doubts, all the fears, all the moments of uncertainty, it had all led to this. They had worked through their struggles and now they were stronger because of it. There were still things they didn't know, still challenges ahead, but she wasn't afraid anymore. They had proven that love, real love, wasn't something that was handed to you on a silver platter. It was something you built together, brick by brick, with patience, with effort, and with the willingness to stay when things got hard. I didn't think I'd find someone like you either, she replied softly, her voice filled with gratitude. You made me see that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. It's not about everything being easy, it's about being there for each other no matter what. And I think we've learned that together. They sat in comfortable silence, the night settling around them, the quiet only broken by the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. It was a moment of peace, a moment where everything felt right. The future was still uncertain, but it didn't matter. Warm. What mattered was that they were in it together. The next few months weren't without their challenges, but something had shifted in both of them. They no longer saw obstacles as things to be afraid of, but rather as opportunities to grow. When things went wrong, they didn't blame each other, they faced the problem together as a team. They had learned to communicate, to be honest, and to share their fears without judgment. It wasn't always easy, but they had built something stronger than they ever thought possible. They didn't have all the answers, and they knew they never would. But what they had now was enough. They had each other, they had trust, and they had a love that was real, raw, and completely theirs. One evening, as they sat together again, this time at their favorite spot by the lake, she felt a sense of contentment wash over her. She had spent so much of her life feeling lost, unsure of where she belonged, but now, for the first time in a long time, she knew exactly where she was meant to be. She was with him, and that was all she needed. You know, she said, breaking the comfortable silence, I used to think that I had to have everything figured out, that I had to have all the answers before I could be happy. But I've learned something different. Happiness isn't about having it all together. War, it's about finding peace with who you are, even when things are messy. He smiled, his eyes lighting up with understanding. I think we are figuring that out together. And in that moment, she realized that love wasn't about perfection, it was about acceptance. It was about accepting each other's flaws, fears, and imperfections and still choosing to be there every single day. It was about finding the beauty in the mess, the hope in the struggle, and the strength in each other. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow across the water. She reached for his hand and he took it without hesitation, their fingers intertwining effortlessly. In that simple, quiet moment, they both understood that they didn't need to have it all figured out. As long as they had each other, that was enough. They didn't know what the future held. There would still be tough times, challenges, and moments of doubt. But as long as they faced those moments together, hand in hand, they knew they could handle whatever came their way. Love wasn't about never facing hardship, it was about facing it together with courage, with trust, and with the certainty that no matter what, they were in it for the long haul. And that was the most beautiful thing of all.